This is going to be an interesting topic to talk about, and one that I've avoided talking about in the past because it is inevitably difficult to do when editing. I want to make it very clear up front, I'm going to be talking a lot about music, and whoever edits this is going to have to add in that music. So, wife behind the camera who helps edit, I want you to know there's going to be a lot of editing notes on this, and if you don't want to edit this, I will.
Why is that the intro to your video?
Because I thought it would be funny.
You're just cringe.
You're cringe. Anyways, music. Music is, I believe, one of the most underrated but most crucially important parts of playing a TTRPG game. Is it necessary? No, you can play a game without it just fine. Does it help way more than you'd expect for the amount of effort that's necessary to put in for it? Yes, I truly, genuinely believe so. In the last video that I recorded, I honestly don't know about release dates. I talked about music and Dimension 20 and how they use it to emphasize things. Notice the players immediately experiencing the energy that is brought with that music. They know what's going on. They're excited about it, and it brings a very fun transferring of energy from one character to another. And I wanted to talk more about that because I truly believe it is one of the most useful tools that you could possibly use. And there's a few specific reasons of why. One, music is something that you don't realize is being used subconsciously a lot of the time. Music is something that we can understand, we know what it's trying to communicate without ever having to actually put intentional thought into it. For example, I'm going to play the same clip twice of me saying the exact same thing. You're walking through a cave and you see many things before you. You see a torch in the distance and a silhouette of a figure. You're wondering exactly what they're doing, and you begin to approach them. As you do so, they slowly turn to look at you and begin to give a large, toothy smile. You're walking through a cave and you see many things before you. You see a torch in the distance and a silhouette of a figure. You're wondering exactly what they're doing, and you begin to approach them. As you do so, they slowly turn to look at you and begin to give a large, toothy smile. Between those two clips, you can easily tell something different is trying to be communicated, despite the fact that I am saying the exact same thing. It's just the music. And this is something that you are subconsciously picking up on. The music has a weird way of influencing the way that we're viewing things. If you ever wanted to watch a horror movie, you could do so and realize that it is way less scary if you turn off the music. In fact, if you just turn off all of the sound, suddenly horror movies become extremely easy to watch. And this is because of a few different things. One, the music many times creates that suspense within us. But two, we are then missing the sound effects that oftentimes create that visceral effect. A strange creaking in the background, or the gross squishing of whenever bones are crushed together. Those things create a reaction within us that we don't have to think about, but our body reacts to anyways. And this is why music is so important and helpful. I personally can't run my games without music. It really bothers me when we don't have them. Anytime that I run an online game, many times I can't actually project the music to everybody else. So I tell them to play their own music, but I make sure to play it in my own headphones. Because without it, I then do not have the ability to know what the energy I'm trying to bring is. It really helps embrace and create the moments that I want to create. So I'm going to provide a few different tips on how to use music effectively in your games so that you can, more importantly, inflict and show what it is that you're trying to communicate to your players. One of the things that I genuinely recommend with music is to know what you have in front of you. A lot of the times I'll just go look up a general vibe on YouTube and I'll play it. And that's fine for specific or general moments. However, when it comes to wanting to create a very intense vibe, I always have a set playlist on hand. Now, I actually do have a second channel where I go and make curated playlists out of royalty-free music. So the reason I mention that though is because I do use those and know exactly what is going to be in every single playlist. A lot of the times my players will mention things like the fact that the music seems to line up perfectly with what I'm saying. It hits the spikes at the right moments. It dips out and becomes quiet at the right moment. And that's honestly just because I've listened to it so much that I know when the highs and lows are, and I naturally begin to lean into them. Knowing what is in front of you and what's there is an incredibly powerful tool to emphasize moments in your campaign, but you don't have to just know this. There's a video that was released like 7-8 years ago by the channel How to Be a Great GM or DM. Oh, I should know that off the top of my head. One of those two, I'm pretty sure it's GM. But they talk about the fact that one of the things that he does is he goes out of his way to get an entire movie soundtrack just as it is. This is because movies are meant to bring an audience through a story. It will start with a slow melody, it will create a very intense melody, but because people can only hold that sort of tension for so long, movies will then begin to go down and up and down again. And so he used those soundtracks to know when it's going to go up and down. Personally, I don't think this is the best method, but I do think it is a fascinating concept. And in fact, all those curated playlists over on my second channel, which I guess I'll link in the description below because I've named it multiple times at this point, do the same thing. I made sure to make the energy between the different songs different so I could ride the waves low and high. By doing this, you really do help keep your players interested throughout an entire session and help draw them in. You want to keep the tension going to the point where it gets at its highest, and then they have a break. That break can be something like combat, it could be something like a joke, it could be something like a new room to experience. But once you've hit that break, you begin to go down and you start ramping the tension again. And music will do this without you having to do it yourself. Now, am I saying that a lazy GM uses music? No, not necessarily. Because actually incorporating the music into your campaign can be incredibly difficult. I mean, unless you just want to sit there and have a stream deck by your side where you can just hit the buttons and do different moods, that's actually a great idea. I'm gonna try that. But there are other tools that you can use, things like Sirenscape, or there are YouTube channels that help you do this. One that I've been enjoying recently is Bardify. I don't know if they've ever commented on any of my videos. I feel like they did, and that's how I found them, but they do have incredible soundtracks for this specific thing. The other thing is sound effects. And I want to be very clear, I don't mean just having a soundboard next to you to hit things and cause sound effects to happen. Dimension 20 does this sometimes, and I personally find it very distracting and takes me out of the moment. They'll hit a button to describe a magic spell effect by causing that sound effect to happen, and I personally find that boring. I would much rather allow my players to imagine what it sounds like because that is far more interesting and engaging. I can't match with what they're going to imagine, and they're all going to imagine different things that they find cool. However, music tends to be more in the background. It's less in the moment and in your face, and I find that to be much better. The other thing you can do with music is do what's called a motif. A motif is an idea of a certain arrangement of musical notes which are used throughout an entire story to constantly display a different moment or character. It's almost like a theme song, but not quite. I think these are really fun, and while I don't expect you to just play the same amount of notes every time a character shows up, by introducing a song that always introduces a certain type of moment, such as the infamous horns from Critical Role.
You try to step away from one of them? Right, that is a...
We have such a Pavlovian response to that horn.
That lets everybody know what's going on. Every time those horns play in Critical Role, they know there's going to be a combat that happens, but it's not going to be a combat that is so serious that it might be story breaking. Whenever it is important enough that the combat is a huge boss moment, that music tends not to play. So by playing those songs over and over again, it's almost like a Pavlovian effect.
Yo, Editing Jay here. I legitimately did not know there was that clip of Liam saying that it was a Pavlovian effect to the actual horns. That was something I discovered afterwards, but in the process of recording it, like, yeah, of course I'd seen that before, but it was so long ago and buried in so much footage that I did not actually remember that. So it was really just kind of a crazy coincidence. Anyways, yeah, I just kind of wanted to pop in here and say that because otherwise I think it feels like I'm just repeating myself unnecessarily, but it was just a huge coincidence. So yeah, anyways, back to the video.
You can begin to train your players to know the event that's happening. And then once you have this effect, you can then begin to rearrange and actually go beyond that in order to make sure that you have circumvented their expectations. An example of this is my DM used to use the same track all the time to introduce a suspenseful moment. And then one day he interrupted it by playing the Prowler theme. That was terrifying. Genuinely, that is probably the most visceral my body has ever reacted to a D&D campaign, because my body subconsciously reacted to this very intense song that I recognized. A lot of people will use video game soundtracks, and I think that's a great idea, because if your players have played said game, They know what to expect with each of the songs. If you use the Terraria soundtrack and begin to use one of the boss themes from that, and your party has played Terraria, they then know that they're getting into an intense combat. So on, so on, so on. Ultimately, music is not necessary. It's not the most important thing in the world, but it lays underneath and creates a new layer that you could never expect to be so incredible and so helpful. And it's all subconscious. It doesn't expect the players to put any intentional, necessary work in themselves. It just sits in the background. And I think that is honestly some of the most fun and unique things you can do, and it takes your story to a new experience. So comment below your favorite soundtracks you like to use in your campaigns. While you're down there, like, comment, subscribe. What else do YouTubers say? Hit the bell? Is that's something that they say, I think?
Turn on notifications.
Turn on notifications. Insert usual YouTube jargon here. Regardless, I hope that this honestly helps you guys out and you can have a wonderful day. So go out into the world and make it your own.